Hello, FCC-Elgin Finance Ministry members. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this homemade video presentation to help frame the issues that we'll be talking about at our February 13th meeting and in the subsequent meetings to follow. If after watching this video you have questions, it would probably be helpful to email me those questions prior to the February 13th meeting. Doing so might help us keep our discussion focused and on track for the limited time we have with each other that day. And please forgive me for any background noise, like my next door neighbor's dog or my husband. I am doing this at home in my home office, and it's not a sound studio. So mea culpa, please forgive me. So without further ado, let's jump right into things. Before beginning, I want to quickly summarize why our ministry seems to be engaged in big picture change conversations pertaining to fundraising. First, we're engaged in an unsustainable practice of funding our operating budget with money from our endowment. Secondly, we don't have concrete policies in place for fundraising activities. We only seem to have practices, which frankly can change from year to year and from council to council. Policies and plans actually prevent inconsistency and can ensure informed future decision making. And finally, relying on a marketing campaign to drive new membership that results in increased giving is frankly one of those, I don't know, how do you put it, putting all your eggs in one basket types of strategies. In fact, the data and trend analysis indicates that we're more likely to fail than succeed with this strategy. As you can see from this excerpt from the Chronicle of Philanthropy and their December 2023, I believe. There's my phone, 2023 edition. For example, at the end of the last century, 70% of Americans described themselves as being church, synagogue, or mosque members. But as we entered into the 21st century, only 47% of Americans belong to a house of worship now. At least that's what they tell the polling people. And specifically, since 1990, there has been a what I would call a mega trend of membership falling throughout the country. Specifically, here you can see there's been a 52% drop in membership in the United Church of Christ membership since 1990. So I guess it's hard for us to change big national mega trends like that with a simple marketing campaign. It might work. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but I think it's important to balance our membership strategy with a fundraising strategy. It's kind of the equivalent of spreading our eggs among a few different baskets. And so I think for those three reasons, that's kind of why we're engaged in these big picture change conversations and what today's presentation is trying to frame. Today's video presentation will focus on three distinctly different yet interconnected issues that we've been attempting to discuss for many months throughout 2023. The first of which is a gift acceptance policy. In other words, a gift acceptance policy is something that answers questions around what types of gifts will we accept versus what we won't accept. This presentation will also talk about a naming rights policy, which is nothing more than the rules of the road with regards to naming things, regardless of whether it's for fundraising purposes or not. And then I'll spend most of my time talking about rewiring our 2025 stewardship campaign, which is how we infuse industry best practices to inspire existing church members to invest in our church community. And we've been talking a little bit about that in the last year as well. I'm just not in as much detail as what we need to. And I'm hoping that this presentation will help kickstart that conversation. First, let's start with the gift acceptance policy. Simply stated, this policy spells out what types of gifts we do accept and which ones we don't accept. The reason for not accepting certain types of gifts is because of the complexity and sometimes even the cost in time and or money that comes with accepting certain types of gifts. You might be wondering why we don't just tell donors that we only accept cash. In other words, sell your stock or your physical possessions and just give us the money. Again, simply stated, our tax system creates financial disincentives for donors to do this sometimes. For example, and just one of many examples, selling a stock that has greatly appreciated over the years will mean paying the capital gains tax on it. But if you donate the stock directly to to a charity like our church, there's no capital gains tax to pay. Plus, you're still eligible to deduct the full fair market value of the asset you donated from your income taxes, up to the overall amount allowed by the IRS, of course. The bottom line is that this policy can make charitable giving to the church easier and more financially advantageous for donors. For those of you who don't recall what we put into this draft policy, this is what we said the church should consistently accept versus not accept. I'm just going to read a little bit, a few of the examples on the slide. We said in the policy that we'll, of course, accept cash and pledges. We'll accept tangible personal property, which is nothing more than a fancy way of saying stuff. If people want to donate their clothing to our clothing closet or food to our food pantry, that's tangible personal property. If they want to donate other things, as long as we say it, as long as they ask in advance and we say yes, we'll accept it. We'll accept marketable securities like stocks. We'll accept money from people who list us as beneficiaries in their retirement plans, or when they put us in as a bequest. In other words, include us in their will. We'll accept that kind of stuff. We'll accept money from people's life insurance beneficiary designations. People who are 70 and a half or older, I believe is the way the law currently reads, they have to start taking required minimum distributions. And there is a charitable IRA rollover provision where they can instruct their, like Edward Jones, financial advisor, to cut a check directly from their IRA to a charity like the church. And that would help count towards their required minimum distribution. And of course, we accept gifts from donor-advised funds as long as that donor-advised fund manager allows the donor to direct those monies to a church. Not all of them do. On the other hand, things that we don't accept, which I think the way we put it in the policy is things that are not listed are not accepted. We will not play the life insurance game. And what I mean by that is where people will buy policies, pay those premiums on the policy, and then specifically list us as the beneficiary. There's this. It's different from under the accept column where we talk about life insurance beneficiary designations. We won't be selling the life insurance. In other words, we don't play that game. Closely held securities. For example, if the Dalton family wanted to, give us Danny's Pizza, that's a closely held security. We don't take ownership of those things as gifts. Nothing stops them from selling the business and giving us the money. But again, there's tax issues in doing that, and they probably would never want to do that. But we don't accept closely held securities. Irrevocable charitable remainder trusts and irrevocable charitable lead trusts. Those are complicated plan giving instruments that I don't have time to get into, but we don't accept them. They're too complicated for our simple church to manage. Same thing with charitable gift annuities, which are complicated and we don't offer because there's a lot of risk and liability in it. We don't accept cryptocurrency and anything else that's specifically, not named in the policy. We just don't accept. With the gift acceptance policy in our rear view mirror, let's take a moment to talk about the draft naming rights policy. Simply stated, this policy spells out the what's, the when, and the how we put names on things, either for fundraising or even non-fundraising purposes. It also addresses how to take names off of things in unusual circumstances. And sometimes, it's just bad stuff happens because somebody broke the law, or it could be historical where it comes to light that somebody owned slaves, for example, and we don't want our name affiliated with that. Or it could be as simple as an ugly divorce where a couple's name is collectively on something like a building or a room, and they want to take it off. Or it was so messy, we want to take it off. Those are just a few examples of unusual circumstances, and we can get into more details in future meetings if you wish. While many other organizations' naming rights policies are significantly longer and more detailed and robust, the draft one that I've helped put together with some of your feedback is basic, and it's intended to be a starting point for our congregation, providing basic guidelines and basic protections. For example, how should we document charitable contributions that come with naming opportunities? This policy should address that. And how does the church council pre-approve naming opportunities so that we aren't randomly offering such opportunities to anyone for anything? This policy kind of helps us with that. And what types of things can be named, and so on and so forth. I can go on for a long time, but that's kind of what the naming rights policy is all about. And while this might all seem far-fetched to some of you, please consider all the things around the church that already have names on it. Our website, for example, has the Yaley Trust name on the mission grants page. There are names etched into much of our stained glass, as you can see along the bottom of this slide. Our founders' pictures hang on our walls, or at least on the wall downstairs in the study. There are plaques on the organ. There are plaques outside the main office. There were sponsor names all over the recent organ anniversary event. We're in the naming rights game, whether we like to admit it or not. And so a policy just seems to make really good sense. I don't find it far-fetched for future church councils to consider selling either temporarily or permanent naming rights for things like, for example, a brick campaign to help underwrite maybe future renovations that we just can't foresee right now, that we wouldn't want to dip into the Yaley Trust to do. A legacy tree program as like an added component to a beefed up memorial gifts strategy. Maybe a room sponsorship strategy to underwrite annual operating costs associated with a specific room, such as our nursery. I can foresee an event sponsorship strategy for like the spring concert series. We've already dabbled in that with the anniversary organ concert back a few months ago. That's not so far-fetched. I don't know. I can see a scholarship program or maybe another named endowment similar to the Yaley Trust. I can see naming rights coming into play down the road. I just can. And so adopting a policy it's good governance, and it provides guardrails, and it provides guidance to future church councils and or ministries even who want to engage in fundraising strategies involving naming rights. And finally, we come to the most difficult issue that's on our ministry's plate, our 2025 stewardship campaign that is to be held at the end of 2024, a mere 10 or 11 months from now. It's gonna be here quickly. This annual fundraising campaign is literally the bread and butter of our annual revenue budget. As this campaign goes, so too does our ballooning budget deficit. Rewiring this campaign makes sense on 3 different levels. First, we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Secondly, identifying some of our bad campaign practices and replacing them with fundraising industry best practices only makes sense. And thirdly, transforming this campaign from a year-end money-focused solicitation into a year-round virtual, or maybe virtuous, I should say, cycle of cultivation, then solicitation, then stewardship, rinse, lather, repeat. It can strengthen our congregation's collective culture of philanthropy and result in, I don't know, a more joyous, charitable giving experience. First, I want to start with a simple assessment of our current efforts, because it's hard to figure out where you're going when you don't have a good grasp on where you currently are at. So I opened up the current UCC Stewardship Campaign Manual. I read it, and it looked very, and I looked very lightly. I shouldn't say very in depth, but I looked very lightly at what we're not doing according to what the manual tells us we should be doing. For example, we are making what fundraising professionals characterize as impersonal solicitations through our reliance on snail mail letters and group announcements and asks. We're also we're investing much time in talking to church members who don't make a pledge. That's something we're not doing. Nor are we talking to donors about increasing their gift over their previous year's giving level. And once the campaign is over, we aren't storytelling about how their gift is being used or how it's making a difference. Additionally, we aren't using donor data from our campaign to guide strategy improvements or identify targeted asks of specific individuals with the capacity to become major gift donors. We aren't creating mission clarity either, mission clarity that aligns with giving through the use of, like, for example, a narrative budget or other such strategies. These are all things that can be found in the UCC Stewardship Campaign Manual. And I point these things out not to be critical, not to throw shade, but simply as a starting point. Because as I started off this slide by saying, it is hard to figure out where you're going when you don't have a good grasp upon where you currently are at. And again, before I get started with how I'm suggesting that we rewire our next stewardship campaign, I thought it might be helpful to share what the fundraising industry considers "quote unquote" best practices and principles for a typical annual fundraising campaign. I've listed out, I don't know, I'm guessing there's 7, 8, 9 different principles and best practices that the fundraising industry considers for an annual campaign like our stewardship campaign. First, personal face-to-face solicitation is the most effective way to raise money. There's been study upon study upon study done on this, and they find that when you sit down with somebody in person and make it personal, you raise more money. I want to say one of the more recent stats I've seen on this subject is that when you ask somebody face-to-face, 75% of people actually make a pledge or a gift. And they will make a pledge or a gift for at least 50% of what they were asked to consider. Whereas direct mail, the response rate is like 0.5% to 2 or 3%. Targeted mail, which is what we're doing, which is a warmer pool, people who know us, not cold, not like a cold mailing. That rate of return depends, especially if you couple it with like a telephone follow-up solicitation. The response rate could be as high as like 25%. In-person solicitation is the most effective way to raise money, and if you want to raise more money, you need to shift to that campaign model. Another best practice is 100% board giving. If donors don't see your board making a pledge or a contribution, that's a leadership issue, and oftentimes people won't follow suit, because if it's not important for the board to be all in, then it's not important for them to be in. Another principle is everybody should be asked to give a specific amount of money. None of these, ambiguous asks like anything you could do would be greatly appreciated while you slide that pledge card across the table. That's not effective. We get token gifts when that is made. There's been, again, a lot of study, focus groups around this issue. And the reason why asking for a specific amount is important is because you offend people when you don't do it. And you offend them because what you've done is you shifted the burden of talking about money to the donor. And the reason why volunteers feel uncomfortable talking about, a specific pledge, think about amount, is because it's talking about money. We've all been taught by our parents not to talk about money. And so shifting the burden to the donor always leads to bad things. And so taking on the responsibility and taking that onus off of them is the best practice. And it usually leads to better consideration and better fundraising and higher fundraising amounts. Another best practice is that volunteers should be making these asks. We shouldn't put professionals like Pastor Jesse, in that position. It's all about street cred, and it's all about effective asking. People give to people. And so when somebody they know and respect is asking them for a gift, people respond. When a paid staffer is asking, they look like they have a conflict of interest. Another best practice is a powerful one, and it's about challenge gifts, or you might think of them as like matching gifts. They're really effective in helping set donors' sights higher. Another practice is the case for support. It can't just be, the case that we make to our donors can't just be, we need money to turn the lights on, or we need money to pay our staff. It needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, it needs to be emotional, it needs to be focused on impact and the good things that happen when you give to an organization. We need to make the case for support donor-centered. It needs to focus on the donor rather than on us, the organization. It's not about our needs. It's about the good that they can do by making a contribution. Another best practice is we need to recognize donors, even when they say that they don't want recognition. We also need to follow up with them consistently for months after they give and steward them. This can get confusing because we call our annual campaign a stewardship campaign, but in the fundraising world, stewardship is what you do after making the ask and after getting their pledge or gift. It's where you show impact, to a donor. What I mean by that is what good has come from the donor making their gift. What lives have been changed, what services have been provided. Another best practice, or principle is that if you want to raise money, you need to talk to individuals. You don't need to talk to foundations. You don't need to talk to companies, because bluntly stated, individuals comprise at least 2/3, if not approximately 3/4 of all the giving that happens in America. Businesses and foundations are a substantially smaller piece of that puzzle. And finally, the concept of equal generosity is important. And what we mean by that is we celebrate all gift sizes and shapes in the same way. And so somebody who can make a $50 contribution to our campaign is celebrated and thanked as robustly as somebody who can make a $10,000 contribution. When people reach deep and they give, and everybody's capacity to give is different, we should celebrate people giving. Simply stated. So we haven't talked about my suggestions yet, but I wanted to provide a foundation for some of the things that we're not doing according to the UCC Stewardship Campaign Manual. And I wanted to provide some context to you around what are best practices and good campaign principles that the fundraising industry considers before we get into that conversation. So I've developed a simple one-page plan that contains goals, strategies, and action items associated with a rewired stewardship campaign. Hopefully, I've completed that by the time that you get this video. If not, it's coming, and it's coming really quickly. Hopefully by our February 13th meeting. A lot more work needs to be done by our ministry, and I don't just mean me. I don't want to drive this train. I think it's important that we collectively at the finance ministry level evolve this plan into something that can be presented to the church council for consideration. Now, on this slide, you're going to see three big picture goals that drive this year's campaign in the draft plan that I have either given you or will give you really soon. There's a financial goal. There is a participation goal. And then there is an upgraded gifts goal. Those goals specifically are to secure $200,000 in pledges from congregation members by the end of 2024. And we'll use those pledges to fund a big part of our 2025 budget. I think this goal is realistic because when you look at how much people actually gave last year in fulfilling their pledges and more, it was close to $200,000. I want to say, if memory serves me right, it was 190 something thousand. Setting a $200,000 goal, even though that's not what we put in our budget, but setting a campaign goal for 200,000 feels realistic, and it feels worthy of our work. The second goal, a participation goal, is to increase the number of congregation members making a pledge from 64 people in 2023 to 70 in 2024. Now, I should say 64 is the last number I saw in our meeting notes and in the emails that were going back and forth at the end of the year. This number may have changed. I'm also not sure, because I haven't been privy to our donor data, whether or not a jump of another 6 donors giving a pledge to the campaign is realistic. We need to talk about these numbers, but setting a campaign goal isn't about just setting a financial number. Setting a participation goal helps drive our financial goal. These are all interrelated goals. And then finally, the third goal, which is about upgrades, or another way to put it is people who increase their pledge amounts from year to year. This goal is that we would secure upgrades, or in other words, increases in pledge amounts from 25% of our 2023 donors. In other words, people who gave to the campaign in 2023, 25% of them will end up increasing their pledge in the upcoming campaign at the end of 2024. That's the final goal. Let's see here. One of the next 3 slides, you're going to see a handful of strategies, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so on this slide, and then the slide after, and then the slide after that, you're going to see strategies. And strategies are different than goals. Strategies are aimed at achieving the big 3 goals that you just saw on the previous slide. And so essentially in planning theory, you have a vision, where do you want to go? Then you set goals, and those goals are designed to answer the question from 30,000 feet, how do we achieve the vision? And then strategies are like, as we're landing the plane, it's like 20,000 feet or 10,000 feet. Strategies are aimed at answering the question, well, how are we going to achieve those goals? I'm going to just kind of quickly go through some of the strategies on the next 3 pages, and then I'm going to pull one out on the 4th slide to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about it. So one of the strategies I'm proposing in our rewired stewardship campaign is that we change the solicitation model. And what I mean by that is that, let's stop just sending out a mailing and asking people to send back their pledge cards. I know that one of the best practices was one-on-one face-to-face solicitations are the most effective. And I understand that that's probably not going to happen. We have a congregation that is fundraising phobic, in my opinion. And so I'm suggesting let's not go all the way. Let's not push all of our chips into the middle of the table. Let's kind of go halfway in, and let's utilize what's called a house party solicitation model, where you recruit different house party hosts. Each of those house party hosts end up inviting, approximately 5 people from the congregation, and we target which people receive invitations. And I'm suggesting that, and I'll get to this in a few bullets, but I'm suggesting donors who have given $250 or more. Our house party host would invite 5 of those people with whom they have a relationship to their home for a house party, like a dinner. It could be potluck. It could be any number of formats. And then a group ask is made of those people. I don't want to get into all the details with regards to how that would work. We would have to put together an entire training program. And I think we can do it in a way where the house party host wouldn't have to ask for a specific dollar amount. It would be driven as part of the pledge forms that people are getting, and people would be asked to consider giving what was on their pledge form. And if they aren't able to do that or willing to do that, then they can make other choices. This would need to be designed, and it would need to be designed down the road. But again, from a big picture perspective, one strategy is change the solicitation model from something that's impersonal, mailing, to something more personal, which is a house party model. Second strategy, as you can see, is developing what I call a menu of giving opportunities. A menu of giving opportunities, and I'll go into more detail in a few slides. This is the one example I'm going to pull out on the 4th slide and talk more about. But a menu of giving opportunities is literally what you think it is. It's a menu, like at a restaurant. And it goes through a bunch of different ways people can give to the church. It streamlines fundraising for the congregation. It's a tool that makes asking easier for the house party host. That way they don't need to invent it all. They can just go from page to page in the booklets that are made available to the people who are at the house party. And it walks you through, how to make a presentation because the booklet's doing the presenting for you. More on this in a moment. Third strategy is utilizing a donor segmentation strategy. What I mean by that is we need to target donors with different asking strategies. For example, as I just said a few minutes ago, I'm suggesting donors who have given to us $250 or more in a gift or pledge. Those are the people who get put into a house party invitation pool. Whereas donors who've given less than $250, maybe we send them a mailing and make a follow-up phone call. That way we're not pushing our chips in the middle of the table all in on a house party strategy. And we're kind of, cutting the baby in half, so to speak, to use a biblical reference. Another strategy to support our goals is to utilize a matching gift strategy. And what I'm suggesting, we're going to have to talk long and hard about this, but I'm suggesting that we stop using FCC trust funds to fund our deficit. And instead, what we do is we take our FCC trust funds, not out of the corpus, but the earned income from the FCC trust to match people's increases or their upgrades from their previous year. And we could do that on a 1-to-1 match or 2-to-1 match or 3-to-1 match, but incenting people to give more so that we can close the deficit, I think is a better strategy for increasing giving because it'll set people's sights higher on the range of gift chart. But I think it'll also be more effective in closing the deficit than just writing checks out of the trust, which will run out one day. The next strategy I'm suggesting is that we develop and use a case for support that's rooted in industry best practices. Our current case for support is less than ideal. It's focused on us. We need this, we need that. We need to turn on the lights. We got to pay Pastor Jesse. None of those things are compelling cases for people to open up their wallets. Some of the letters that we've sent in previous years have lacked effectiveness and they don't align well with best practices. We need to be talking about what does people's money accomplish and do? What's the impact? Rather than, we need to pay the gas bill. Last strategy on this slide is fine-tuning our phone-a-thon strategy and tweaking the calling script and maybe aligning when those phone calls get made better with, year-end calendar and industry stuff. Almost there, guys. I promise. The third and final slide of strategies that I'm suggesting that we undertake to achieve the goals in the one-page plan for our upcoming stewardship campaign would be to actually invest our time, energy, and effort in a post-giving stewardship strategy. And what I mean by that is maybe every single month we should focus on programs or messaging to help, build and strengthen our congregation's culture of philanthropy. On this slide, I've included 3 ideas, and they're just ideas. I'm not suggesting we do these things, but these are ideas of post-giving stewardship activities. For example, investing in a monthly podcast focused on, what people's giving is actually accomplishing at the church, telling those stories without asking for more money. People want to know what their money is accomplishing. And so putting out a podcast and sending that link to them every month as part of our e-newsletter, that makes some sense to me. Maybe hosting a fun event like a TED Talk, right? And I don't mean a technical, juried TED Talk. I mean a TED Talk-esque type of an event where the topic is giving and we find a few speakers to actually give a talk about the topic of giving. And it doesn't have to be on church giving. It could be on the joyousness and the power of giving of oneself. Helping people see that giving is aspirational and it is something that we're called to do. That can have a ripple effect, not just on how they view their church giving, but on how they give to other things in the community. The third idea I came up with was, well, maybe monthly, on a monthly basis, 5-minute testimonials from the pulpit on Sunday, on a particular Sunday during any given month, and having that focus on the joy of philanthropy, right? And maybe it's a member of the congregation talking about something that's joyous about around their charitable giving. And it doesn't have to be church giving. It could be, them volunteering at pads and, how giving brings them joy in doing that. Or, maybe giving food or money to Food for Good or Elgin. The intention here is modeling the joy of giving to others. I want to say on PBS, at the end of the PBS NewsHour, every single day, they have a segment called Brief but Spectacular. And I think we could model, those, 2, 3, 4, 5-minute testimonials once a month from the pulpit, kind of like that. And it would be people talking about their giving. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to pull one of those strategies out and talk a little bit more in depth about that. And the one I decided to pull out was this menu of giving opportunities. I'm sure the last few slides were filled with, the last few slides that were filled with, campaign strategies, that going through that probably all felt like a whirlwind. And so I'm really sorry about that. So in an attempt to provide a little bit more substance, I thought maybe we can go and take a deep dive on one of those strategies, specifically this menu of giving opportunities, which I talked about on that first slide. The menu of giving opportunities, as I envision it, it would be a paper booklet for use by house party hosts. It would be designed to make the stewardship campaign presentation simple, because no one's going to agree to, or volunteer to be a house party host if it's complicated. So kind of think of this tool as a child's paint by numbers workbook. I also think that a digital flip book can be developed for use with email and snail mail solicitations for donors targeted for asks of less than $250, but we shall see what's possible. Now, this tool would also be designed to not just ask participants for their stewardship campaign gift or their pledge, but also allow them to thoughtfully give consideration to giving to any of the church's myriad of other fundraising appeals, all at the same time. The thinking behind this strategy is really simple. Let's stop nickel and diming our church family, because fundraising research literally shows that when people feel over-solicited, they give less, and they even stop giving. Now, please note, all of what I've been sharing throughout this video, including this idea of a menu of giving opportunities, it's all nothing more than just suggestions from me. Our committee, the finance ministry, still needs to review. We need to discuss. We need to revise everything before making recommendations to the church council. So please don't view anything I've said so far as this is what I think we have to do. These are all ideas that I'm putting out there for discussion. I'm, of course, rooting it in the fact that I'm a fundraising professional and in fundraising industry best practices. But again, nothing gets decided until we come to consensus on all of this. I am not clear as to whether any of these policies or plans have been presented to the church council for consideration and approval yet. I know I saw an email from Judy yesterday, and she seemed to indicate that at least one of the policies was shared with council, but they haven't acted on anything. So generally speaking, it seems to me that if none of it's been taken up by council, or what I mean is passed and approved by council, then there are 3 things that need to occur, and we need to do them at some point. Not necessarily our February meeting, but in the not so distant future. The first thing is we need to review, discuss, revise, and ultimately make a motion recommending approval of a gift acceptance policy. Secondly, we also need to review, discuss, revise, and ultimately make a motion recommending approval of a naming rights policy. And finally, we need to review, discuss, revise, and ultimately make a motion recommending approval of our 2025 Stewardship Campaign Plan. Now, again, as I just said on the last slide, please understand I am not asking our committee to simply rubber stamp the draft documents that I've put together. My work up to this point is simply intended to give us something to consider and a starting point for conversation. To be clear, this will require setting aside large blocks of time on our upcoming agendas to do this work together. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in the same place as we were in 2023, where we often ran out of time at most meetings to have any substantive discussions on any of these issues. I want to end this video presentation in a similar manner as to how I started it. Please join me in reflecting on the why. And I can think of no better summary than the words Kurt Newman used in his treasurer's report at our recent annual meeting last month. And he said in that report, consequently, those deficits and the recognition of them represent challenges as well as opportunities for the church. The trend of persistent deficits is of serious concern because it potentially could result in reductions to the principal of the FCC trust, which would have the corollary effect of reducing the return on that investment. Such a result is predictable and inevitable, though only without any efforts to mitigate or even reverse that trend. Thank you for that, Kurt. And thank you for taking time to watch this pre-meeting video presentation focusing on the fundraising policies and the stewardship plan that's, I guess, literally before us now. Starting at our February 13th Finance Ministry meeting, I look forward to beginning this journey with you. I suspect that you likely have questions, and rather than waiting until the February 13th meeting, please send a group email to me and the rest of our committee, and include in that email any questions that you may have. I'll attempt to answer what I can in writing by responding reply to all with any emails that I receive. And what I can't get to, I'll bring those answers with me on February 13th. This efficient use of technology hopefully can help keep our meeting efficient and on time. I look forward to seeing you in a few days.